Welcome back to the news, everybody. It's another edition of the Roundup, where I go through a lot of stories that are going on in the industry today. We have Diablo sales numbers. We've got an update on the actual process of developing that game and the big team issues that they had, as well as Rockstar Games pulling a little bit of their own Grand Theft Auto, EA not knowing that a game got cancelled under them, and a little more. So let's hop straight into it with the sales figures of D4. Right. It's kind of annoying that Blizzard won't give us an actual number of units, but the fine print does explain what's been factored in, where basically D4 is now the fastest selling game ever, and they clarify both in terms of units and dollars. They held off to announce this when they had $666 million in sales, and that's what they got in 5 days. And with that, 276 billion demons have been killed since the launch of Early Access. Players have been vanquished 316 million times. 5 million of those were to the Butcher. 163 players have made it to max level in hardcore mode, of course, where the deaths are permanent. Congratulations to one of my WoW alumni, Annie Fuchsia. She also managed to do that on her first character, I believe. And I think that number's up at 200 now. And of course, for the first, I believe it's 1,000 people to get a level 100 hardcore character, they'll be put in a statue, which is kind of neat. And D4 was also the #1 Twitch category from June 1st to June 9th. Yes, the launch has been pretty damn massive. I'll be sharing with you next week my endgame thoughts as well as some of Matt's. Broadly speaking, I've been having a tremendous time in the game, but I do have some fairly significant current concerns and definitely some worries for what the seasonal content is going to be like, and maybe a little bit of a worry that there are parts of Diablo that are really good at the start, but perhaps some elements of the broader game design and the open world will kind of clash. At the very least, I know nobody wants to do the renown grind again. Nobody. Anyway, going back to the sales, certainly being SimShip on consoles will humongously help here versus D3. But yes, this has absolutely been a very massive success. This game is making a lot of money. And again, it hasn't came out in China yet, and Diablo is absolutely humongous in China. And I suppose for a bit of an update on Whoopi Goldberg watch, because Whoopi Goldberg complained that her Mac can't run Diablo 4. People have been able to use the Apple DirectX 12 porting tool to, of course, get Diablo 4 running on the new Apple Silicon Macs. Not that I think that will expand their sales figures all that much. For me, though, the thing that is annoying is that we do not know the sales numbers, because if we knew the sales numbers, then we could actually work out an average amount of revenue per customer, and that would give us some inkling as to how many people are going for the more premium editions, how many people are buying those store cosmetics. As it stands, though, we just can't find that out. My next story, then, is actually still on Diablo 4. There was a real rough report about the state of the D4 team, right? And just there being issues. And we've had a few people talk about there just being issues as well looming, like a lot of people being ready to hand in their resignations once the game actually ships. And with that, we've actually got a follow-up report. And by the way, if you like more videos like this, do hit the subscribe button, and also click the bell and click all notifications instead of personalized notifications. That's because personalized notifications will just randomly not tell you, whereas all notifications will actually do the job, because yes, that's kind of annoying. It's one of those things I do have to ask, because it actually does make the numbers change. As soon as I, in a few videos ago, asked people to actually sub and like, all those numbers went boom in the analytics, which is kind of neat to watch. Anyhow, so Adam Morgan, who writes for Esquire, has corroborated prior reporting on the disastrous development of D4, and then also done sort of like a follow-up report. And rather shockingly, by all accounts, things are moving in a good direction. So to go into it, and the full article is worth a read, but there are some highlights here. So at the time, there were many allegations about the company culture going on. Here's a quote from the article. A lot of the men on the calls were like, "We knew these guys were assholes, but we didn't know they were abusive," a former employee says. And the women were like, "Did you not think those two things were related? And how did every single woman know about the abuse?" It's one of those things where people act different ways in front of different people, and I think the people who are more likely to engage in that kind of harassment, they're obviously going to treat men differently, so it's hardly a surprising thing. And unless they're like truly self-destructive, they're probably not going to go around the place like over bragging or like over making it clear, I suppose, to people around that they're engaging in behavior that they know is wrong. I mean, there's obviously dickheads who do go around and brag, but I would imagine less in a in the workplace context, though I'm pretty sure that happened as well, because it does seem that things were a bit of a shit show. Now, the sources that were speaking to Morgan corroborated many of the things that were stated to Shannon Lau in the original reporting, where that original reporting basically was, yeah, Diablo 4 development, total shit show. Attrition, very high. People are worried about if the game can actually ship in a good enough state and have enough, seasonal content going forward. And to give some color in that, we can compare two quotes. Here's one. Working in Diablo 4 was one of the most traumatizing game experiences of my life, a former employee tells me, speaking of the earlier years under the game's first director and lead designer. But then there's a new person here, Naz, who joined that team in August 2021 and said, I've been treated with nothing but the utmost respect, and everyone has been an absolute joy to work with. So it seems that currently, even under sources that are protected by anonymity, employee-led action and some leadership from Joe Shelley has actually helped to turn things around, especially as shown by the monthly surveys. Obviously, it doesn't undo that bad things happen, but it does show that good things are happening. And I guess the bit here that's interesting is that these are sources protected by anonymity, right? So they're not going to receive blowback for what they say, and even with that, seemingly things are actually pretty good. So here's what's interesting. This is about the survey model, and apparently a lot of this has got better under the leadership of Joe Shelley. Right, former employees tell me, the earliest versions of the surveys in 2020 featured atrocious satisfaction scores, and that the slide decks presenting their findings included bullet points like feedback is often not heard, concerns about cliques forming, poor listening, transparency and communication, slow decision-making, unclear approval process. This feedback was collected during the final year of Briga and McCree's leadership, not under Shelley. Of course, that is the past lead designer and game director, with that being the McCree that the Overwatch hero McCree was named after, leading to that hero, of course, being renamed in the game. And according to Rod Ferguson, Shelley and several employees that I spoke with, these surveys have actually improved significantly since then. So that is kind of interesting. And while all this does sound good and happy, it's not the entire story. There is a little bit more here. So there are people, of course, reacting internally to what Activision are doing. There's a big difference then between working in a Blizzard team and being happy with your team, and obviously what the bigger company is doing. So regarding that Bobby Kotick piece in Variety, that was just like a total PR job, puff piece of bullshit. On that quote, everyone is livid. And there are claims from former employees that once we started unionizing, the company got very hostile. But internally, people seem to be a bit more happy and proud of their work. I did ask them if things had changed for the better. They all said yes. They all spent more time lifting up their colleagues than talking about themselves. I'll tell you stories about this game for the rest of my life, John Mueller said near the end of my visit. After a quiet moment, he pivoted in his chair and looked at me in the eye. Great stories, he clarified. Really, honestly wonderful stories. All of that then does sound quite nice. From what I understand, there are still issues with this team. A lot of people, because this was a long development process, it had reboots, a lot of people are going to want to move on naturally. I also believe it's the case that in the satellite studios of Blizzard Entertainment, so whether that's Proletariat or Blizzard Albany, who used to be called Vicarious Visions, I do understand there are culture clashes and issues at those satellite studios. So I think not all is fantastic, but it does seem that things have got a bit better. And it's one of those things. I know that for a lot of people, it is about, let's, eat the popcorn, right? And enjoy the drama as it happens. But the reason why we report in these stories in the first place and actually get the word out, the bad things are happening at these companies, it is so that in the future, we can receive follow-up reports that actually things have got a bit better. A great example of that was Rockstar, who got absolutely raked over the coals and then, within a year or two, had actually made very significant steps that employees were happy to speak about. So this is actually the process of journalism and media working. Now, to move on, there is actually some in Rockstar who have changed the rules on cars, and this has got people going. Obviously, Grand Theft Auto Online is a big money printing tool, and ahead of the latest event, San Andreas Mercenaries, they're removing some cars. Right? They've said lesser used vehicles will be removed from in-game websites to streamline the browsing experience. These will be made available via event showrooms, the Lucky Wheel, and other places. So in a way, this could make sense. Clean up the store, right? Inflation is a real thing. But what actually happened is nearly 200 cars were removed, and people are not thrilled. This does include things like the Jester that some people like. Pretty rough. That being said, there is the other side of this. How do you get these things? And of course the answer is money. Right, so the Vinewood Car Club is an additional benefit for GTA Plus subscribers, and it gives access to a rotating range of vehicles that you can use, and then, of course, you can pay in-game cash at a discount to acquire those, and that will include vehicles that are now removed from the in-game stores. Now, these removals were announced June 8th, the Vinewood Car Club was launched June 9th, San Andreas Mercenaries launched June 13th. Very, very tight sequence of events, which quite clearly meant that players, in many cases, couldn't prepare for this. In the next story then, a fun one about Respawn cancelling Titanfall 3. And this is one of those things. So a former designer, Mohamed Alavi, was speaking to the Burnt Network. It was captured by PC Gamer, and it kind of all exploded. So after Titanfall 2, they began to work on prototypes for Titanfall 3. And after the growth of PUBG, some people in that team built a battle royale out of Titanfall 3 classes. They then actually just in their own multiplayer tests were playing the battle royale prototype more, seemingly finding it to be more fun. And then they basically realized, wait, we should do the thing that we actually find to be fun. So he said, we literally canceled Titanfall 3 ourselves because we were like, we can make this game, it's going to be Titanfall 2 and a little better, or we could make this thing, which is clearly amazing. Now, according to him, when EA were told about Apex Legends by Vince Zampella and Drew McCoy, Respawn had actually already been developing it for 6 months. And at that time, EA executives thought they were working on Titanfall 3. They were like, you have this game that sold X million copies. You went from making a third one, a $60, would have been 70 now, a box product, which, by the way, we bought your company for, because they bought Respawn in the middle of this. So they were like, we bought it, so we'd have IP in Titanfall, and you'd make Titanfall 3, and then you come back and say you're going to make a free-to-play non-Titanfall game? What? Which is quite hilarious. Now, this all prompted a lot of public speculation about the idea of the game being, unveiled or leaked in some format or some crazy stuff like that. But honestly, that just completely misunderstands how prototypes work, which is exactly what he said. Like, the thing that they were playing was imagine Titanfall 2 assets and bad programmer art on a very buggy, unfinished prototype. Now smear Vaseline all over it. Yeah, it was just the prototype was fun. They found the fun, and they decided to make a game based on the fun that they found. It's like, yeah, you could keep on iterating Titanfalls again and again and again, and I would love that because I really love Titanfall, but I think we all know that the thing that has found broader appeal, that has performed better, is Apex Legends. And that's pretty much that. It obviously ended up working out very, very, very well for EA, and with Respawn, look, good studios do prototypes. When they can, they try to do things to de-risk a project, especially if it's a very gameplay-oriented thing like a shooter. All right, next then, on our final story, a little bit of Embracer channeling their inner Boromir with Lord of the Rings. So here's the deal. Embracer recently had an open letter that, was pretty much talking about restructuring, cutting some costs, focusing on things that will more likely win, and a lot of that does make sense. Embracer is bloody humongous. You can only acquire companies for so long before you just naturally become bloated with loads of overlap between departments and just general headless chickenness going on. Just that in this case, the headless chickens are all burning a whole bunch of money. So they actually talked a little bit about Lord of the Rings. Is quite funny. We own Lord of the Rings, and we know we need to be exploiting Lord of the Rings in a very significant fashion and turning it into one of the biggest gaming franchises in the world, and that's obviously something we're going to be doing. That's a much better use of resources than some of the other projects that some of our teams have been working on. Working together, we have those opportunities, and we're really excited to see that working relatively quickly. So yes, we're going to use the ring for Gondor. Now, I'm not going to be 100% down on them, because, look, now with all this going on, obviously people are thinking about Lord of the Rings Gollum, because Lord of the Rings, it's the IP that Embracer now own. Thing is, though, Lord of the Rings Gollum, total shit show, and greenlit long before Embracer Group got their keys to Middle-earth. So, that's basically the question. What are they going to do with this? I mean, look, they have lots of very strong teams, actually. There's also buzz about films, like the whole, was it War of the Rohirrim, which apparently they're going to be doing as a film. So there's a lot of buzz going on, a lot of talk. Overall, I would say that Lord of the Rings has had some fantastic games in it. A while ago, though, the third-person, like, hack-and-slash games, people really, like, they weren't amazing, but those EA ones, I think there's a nostalgic place in everyone for those. You've got Battle for Middle-earth 1 and 2, which I think were both fantastic in their own right. There's plenty of good content, but generally also quite a lot of misses. Perhaps a more coordinated strategy where there is a lot of development talent, perhaps that actually could go well. Like, Embracer have had a lot of mess, but also Embracer have been busy acquiring. If Embracer is moving from a acquire phase into a consolidate and actually exploit the things that we have properly instead of have a bunch of mess, well, look, then the profit motive could result in more good Lord of the Rings video games. Or it could all go to shit. We don't know. It hasn't happened yet. But that is it for today's video. Now, if you want to watch something else, something will appear and cover my face up very, very, very shortly. We've had lots of content on the channel, pretty much daily videos now, so if you want more of that, hit that sub button. With that said, I'll see you next time.